It's here. It's finally here. After years of waiting, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is finally, well, in the wild. So what do you think of the final game? Listen on for our full review of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for Nintendo Switch. About 20 years ago, Nintendo launched two genre-defining video games. There was Super Mario 64 and The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Both games took the existing series and transformed them into something new and distinct, setting forth a pattern that nearly all Mario and Zelda games followed from then on. After those many years, Zelda's next evolutionary step has arrived in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, this brand new, massive open-world game that completely redefines what a Zelda game is, all the while delivering one of the largest and best games in recent memory. Except this isn't like Ocarina of Time, which was essentially just Link to the Past in 3D. No, Breath of the Wild is something bold and new. This is basically the equivalent of the Super Mario 64 for the Legend of Zelda series. And the results are incredible. The very setup of Breath of the Wild seems like a direct response to growing criticism of Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess. Instead of a dialogue-heavy and long-winded tutorial, it drops you right into the middle of the action with just cursory guidance. The opening on the Great Plateau is one of the most effective tutorials I've ever seen, as it works as a brilliant, self-contained intro that also lays down the foundation for the entire game's progression. It all works like this. Gather some story quests to give you a modicum of direction, and then aimlessly wander around looking for mini-dungeon-like shrines and hidden collectible Koroks while taking down whatever monsters and vicious elements you come across along the way. The shrines are quite possibly my favorite addition. They're peppered throughout Hyrule and offer up challenges that can take anywhere from a few minutes to a half an hour. Some are simple one-room puzzles, some are battles against tough foes, others are multiple theme puzzles all in one. Even more involve overworld challenges like mazes and boss fights, and there's a ton of them. There's 120 of them in total. And once found, they also function as fast travel points, so they're integral to fully exploring the massive land of Hyrule. When completed, the shrines also give you spirit orbs that are used to upgrade your health and stamina. They are intrinsically linked to the progression of the game, and they make up the bulk of the Breath of the Wild's dungeon content. And that's because the other dungeons, which there are only a few, they're ultimately kind of disappointing. They feel insubstantial, despite the fact that they have a few neat tricks and puzzles nestled in there. They're only a little bit more complicated than some of the more complex shrines. They're cool, but not memorable, mainly because the majority of them have a similar static style. The main hook of each one is a way to manipulate your surroundings on the map, but the Metroid Prime-esque 3D maps make it pretty hard to judge what is even going on. Fortunately, the disappointing dungeons don't mess with the brilliance of the open world, which is an absolute joy to explore and, maybe in some metaphorical way, the Zelda series' biggest and greatest dungeon ever. I often would spend hours just wandering around Hyrule, looking for shrines and other secrets. The various nooks and crannies all have some reward, even if, as you get later into the game, the reward might be a super low-tier weapon or item that you instantly discard. In general, discarding items is a thing you'll do a lot of, as especially early on, your inventory is woefully limited. Even as I upgraded the inventory by using the Korok seeds that you found from, finding Koroks, I still often had to clumsily enter the inventory screen to sort and eventually figure out what weapon to discard when I came across a new one. Equipable items are all boiled down to a single attack or defense stat though, so it's a little streamlined, but still a little clumsy to use. The weapons all degrade and break as well, so you constantly need to be refreshing your supply. The variety of armaments you come across allows for a lot of creativity in combat, though I do miss some of the focused nuance of recent 3D Zelda combat. Where it succeeds though is the fact that you have near infinite ways of approaching battles. You can run in melee weapons blazing, or hide back in the shadows picking off enemies one by one with arrows and bombs. Making use of the other rooms, like the metal manipulating Magnesis one, also allows for more freeform battling. In addition to weapons, you can also pick up a lot of materials. Fortunately, the materials you collect isn't limited to any kind of inventory management thing, but that still makes it unwieldy to sift through as you have so many different materials. You won't find recovery hearts anywhere in Hyrule. Instead, you have to use these materials to make food and make meals and make elixirs that do everything from restore your health to temporarily boost your attack, defense, or cold and heat resistance. Making meals is fun the first couple times, but over time you just spend a lot of time sitting there by a camp stove, waiting for things to cook. It's a good way to restore health and everything, but it's just a drag on the explorative fun. But that explorative fun is so fun and so constant. At any given time you have a wealth of options of what to do next. Even story quests come in bunches where you can finish them in any order. In addition to the main quests, a variety of side quests help pepper the world of Hyrule, all with different characters that are well written, pointing in the direction of dipping your toe into another element of this huge game. The story is surprisingly dark. It's not quite at Majora's Mask levels of despair, but it takes place in a Hyrule that lost, and you have to deal with that aftermath. From the moment Link wakes up to start the adventure, the world is filled with sadness and loss. Your travels around the world just highlight that tragedy, often in affecting ways that help color and deepen the main characters. Link still doesn't talk, but even he gets some subtle character development along the way. Every other major character does talk, though. Across the board, the voice acting is great, even if it's a little cheesy.
I feel like I should apologize. I was doing all I could to protect Hyrule when that thing got the best of me. Sorry that me resting with the rubble caused such a mess.
The tone overall fits with the series, though. Breath of the Wild doesn't need to be entirely self-serious, even if it tries real hard at some times. The voice acting is a fine representation overall of the characters we've been reading for years. While I wholeheartedly recommend digging into the story, the craziest thing about it is that it's largely optional. After you leave the plateau, you can go right to Hyrule Castle and fight Ganon immediately. You'd probably get annihilated, but it's theoretically possible. You don't need to complete dungeons or even find the Master Sword. You don't even need to find out what happened 100 years ago. You can just roll into Hyrule Castle and take on the Demon King. It's a novel idea that works extremely well with the open world design. The soundtrack in Breath of the Wild is ambient but brilliant. Particularly standout tracks are the village themes and the completely incredible Hyrule Castle theme. In general, the game's sound design is immaculate. Throw on a pair of headphones and you can just live in Hyrule with the array of sounds. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is an important game, and not just because of how long it's been in development or how many times it's been delayed. No, Breath of the Wild is important because it's an amazing new entry in Nintendo's prestige series. It absolutely reinvents what it means to be a Zelda game while still staying true to what makes past games work so well. This is a landmark game that shows that Nintendo can make one hell of an open world adventure. It's not flawless, really what wildly open-ended game is, but even with its faults, Breath of the Wild is still one of the most impressive games I've played in years. Really, if you like video games, you should make it your business to check out Breath of the Wild.
Wake up, Link.